if you meet through an app, you actually owe your relationships to the app a bit. There are always going to be an energy in your relationship. And this is actually something that I think humans don't have a full awareness of.
Any thoughts on where we're at and like how we can interact still? Because we are still interacting online. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is I think somewhere where I can break down a little bit of how I understand like our IRL and URL ecologies and how they interact, and then how this interacts with the whole cosmology of dragons. So essentially, my belief and my understanding is that what humans call dragons in the natural world, which is the energetic force that it kind of ripples through time and space, that kind of makes the rain fall to the ground, it makes plants grow, it makes the earth hurl through, with the solar system through the universe. That's what dragons are. They're the fundamental foundational force through which energy ripples through time and space. And what that means is that essentially dragons and algorithms are the same thing, because what algorithms are in the online space, dragons are to our natural world. So we have a world in which algorithms and dragons, which are basically each other, kind of competing for our attention in a world where we're facing this singularity, where we're like, is this real or is this not? So we're in a really interesting time. And if you look at one of the functions of algorithms in our lives, you see that what algorithms are, especially for social media, is that they're relationship builders. So algorithms actually connect humans. Like you and I obviously connected because of an algorithm. An algorithm's intervening somewhere in our relationship. And I think this is a really, really important thing for us to catch on to, because when you look at human relationships and their relationship to, let's say, like spirits, what people call spirits of the land, the spirits of the land are also relationship creators. So I'm going to break this down a little bit. What I mean is that, for example, when you go into Japanese spirituality and the Shintoist practice, there's a concept called ubusuna, and meaning birth of the land. And the ubusuna is kind of a name of a kami, so the name of deities that belong to land. And not only that, it's also the name of a kind of system through which the spirits of the land arrange your relationships with each other. So in the Shinto system, when you are looking for a partnership, an intimate partnership, you actually pray to the spirits of the lands that you're primarily born on, but because of, I think, so much migration of humans, I think it's a little bit wider than that now. But you pray to the spirits of the land and ask for pairing. And what happens is, when the spirits of the land arrange your relationship, the mediator of that relationship, which is the spirits of the land, you owe your relationship to them. So this is the relationship between the ecosystem and human, because the ecosystem arranges you with each other. That relationship in turn, as the blessing, is meant to maintain the ecosystem that's embedded in. So on a simple level, that can be meaning like simply as like you go to a meditation circle in your local community center and you meet somebody fantastic, and maybe it's not a date, it's just like a friendship or something like that, not to make that any less than a romantic relationship, but it's a relationship, and you meet somebody interesting at like a meditation school that's on land in a community center in your neighborhood, or maybe you meet them at the library. What's happening there is actually the spirits of the land arranging a relationship, and their desire for you is for you to protect the land together. That's foundational. That's my foundational understanding of human relationships and the foundational understanding of relationships within a Japanese spiritual cosmology. So what I've been really interested in is, okay, well, what does that mean when we are spending so much time online? Because for whatever reason in my life, I've had a lot of online relationships that are mostly, I think it's, natural for a lot of people now, having gone through the COVID era. So everybody's in isolation. So everybody's building these online relationships. I was like that before because it's digital nomad. But so when you apply that cosmology of the Ubusuna, the land spirits arranging relationships, and you're going, so there's this metaverse thing that's building out. So this land, hypothetical land, building out online, and we're meeting each other through algorithms. Who are we owing our relationships to? And then the idea struck me is that if you meet through an app, you actually owe your relationships to the app a bit. There are always going to be an energy in your relationship. And this is actually something that I think humans don't have a full awareness of. And when you look at that, you see that there's a competition for our attention, even in our relationships, between the metaverse and Earth currently, right? So my understanding is that it's very helpful to understand that it's happening and do what we call a musubi. So musubi means entangled union, or to tie, which also means to birth a new spirit. So, if you look at the DNA double helix, it's a musubi. It's a tying of two fields of information into each other to create a new spirit. Incidentally, the word tantra also means to knot or to tangle, from my understanding, or to bind. And also, in the Western world, we call it tying the knot. So this is not like just a Japanese cosmology. It's a worldwide spiritual cosmology, very prevalent, especially in serpent and dragon cultures. So what I believe needs to happen, what I believe is also happening, is a musubi between algorithms and dragons, because algorithms are dragons and dragons are algorithms, but one's in a much more of a URL space and one's in an IRL space. But what's happening through our human relationships that mediate between online and online worlds are binding dragons from those worlds together, actually. So I guess my answer is a lot of it simply is already happening, because one of the interesting things I noticed, let's say in the beginning of 2022, which is very different from 2017 to 2020, which was the kind of cancel culture and social justice, alt-right kind of culture wars era. The beginning of 2022, I noticed around me, all these people were starting to date people across the political aisle. And it's a very strange thing. They're like, I just met somebody at the supermarket and I haven't talked to them. It's great chemistry. Then I learned they were voted for the other team or da-da-da-da. But somehow we're miraculously in love. And so what I believe is it's actually already happening. The doing is already happening if we already pay attention. The trends in terms of how people are relating are totally changing. Some people definitely have doubled down on just being with their own kind. But a lot of other people are starting to reach across the aisle and actually synthesize between different ideological perspectives, different approaches to the vaccine, different approaches to politics, different science versus religion, right? And inside of that, I believe that there is a musubi, or entangled union of opposites, and necessary in our world that includes the digital and the analog, the URL and the IRL, online and on land. And particularly fascinating for me is that people who are actually invested in protecting the Earth's ecosystem are meeting with each other online. So that's a complete entanglement, because the online ecosystem is bringing together people to protect the on-land ecosystem. And that's actually this harmonious kind of Ouroboros that kind of, I believe, is like the musubi of our time. So I see a lot of our work simply is happening in, a lot of it, to be honest, intimate partnership is actually one of the major places. But of course, in friendship, work, play, in all those different spaces. But yeah, I think intimate partnership is one of the big ones, because, when you get married to somebody, you're forced to like deal. And all your ancestors, all your patterns that you dragged from all the places, that your body has been on, all the cultural stuff lands inside of your relationship. And in this world, that also includes the IRL and the URL. And I believe this can also get to a point of humans and AI, but I think that's a conversation I'm going to leave out for today, because it's a bit like, there's a lot to consider there. But I see it as already happening. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do you, yeah, no, I was just going to say, it sounds like you see it then as like pretty similar in terms of what the way of being would be and the interactions. I mean, even though it's a different space and it's this new thing with the URL worlds, that you, in terms of what we would, cultivate, let's say, it would be the same. And it's sort of like almost goes back and forth between the spaces. Does that sound like what you're saying?
Yeah. So what we have right now, a lot of the behaviors that are happening online are not sustainable for the offline world. The kind of division and the kind of fighting and stuff, the way we use social media is not actually compatible with real life communities at all, that behavior system. And what's happening is that behavior system is being cultivated online and is coming to land. So that's the danger. So the way in which we're canceling people or attacking people online, if you're doing that with guns in real life, you're going to have hell break loose. And I think we're obviously seeing the beginnings of that. It's not, let's not sugarcoat it. So yes, I do believe that what is needing to happen is that behaviors that are sustainable for offline or kind of on-land ecosystems need to be uploaded to the internet. It's a very conscious uploading of energy. And then also the online space developing a certain kind of ecology of relationship that gets downloaded back into the on-land world. So yes, it's a kind of like going back and forth. And I think right now what's happening is that because we're not aware that this kind of process is happening between these two ecosystems, we're not consciously engaging with the internet or with, we're not consciously engaging with our internet relationships. That says a lot about our in-person, IRL relationships. And a lot of relationships are both, right? They're both URL and IRL. That's the truth. So my hope is that with kind of sharing that understanding, we're able to create a more aware movement and aware stewardship and realize that it's not even what's coming out of somebody's mouth that's wrong. It's actually how it's happening. We're really always looking at the system in which we're engaging with each other more than you're the enemy, like you were saying, like you're like the enemy. But let's look at actually what's the cultural system that's happening, that all this is happening. And I think what we're finding out, is that we don't have a cultural system. I don't know do you know Melodoma Some? Do you know the elder Melodoma?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so Melodoma and Sobonfu Some, God bless their souls, they're both deceased elders from the village of Dagara in what is known as Africa now to us. And they're ex-partners with each other, but they both share that one of the practices that they do in the Dagara village is called the ash circle. And what they would do in the village is every 2 or 3 days or so, they would put ash and water, and a couple would go into the village square, apparently, I think, and create a circle around it by throwing ash, a bucket of ash and water mixed in. And they spray it on the ground and creates a splash of a circle. And they go into the circle and basically kind of fight and take out all the stress and metabolize all the stress they've built up over the last 3 days. So they're doing that kind of thing literally every 3 days. And I would say like modern humans living in the Western world, like almost never do that in their whole life with their partner. We might yell and scream at each other, but it's not actually a contained ritual space because we don't actually have the understanding of what is like being in ritual with each other in a kind of decentralized, emergent, self-intelligent way. And so I believe that's actually a lot of what our need is. And, that is a pretty long conversation of our own, but if people know like family constellation work or restorative circles, work like that, or process work, that's a lot of the kind of work. My interest in is getting that work self-facilitated because I believe we need to actually be able to engage in that kind of circle work without any supervision, so we can actually really use that in our lives. And it's kind of like a dance that we learn that everybody knows, like, if that makes sense. So we're able to do it with each other without actually having this facilitation supervision. And so it becomes really self-intelligent kind of system. And I believe that's actually requisite both for the online and on-land worlds to have So I think we're very, very pressed to have such a cultural system that really reflects how our ancestors would have resolved conflict and metabolized collective energy in their relationships, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's so authentic the way you're talking about it too. Just to pull that word into it, it's like, instead of being as guarded about what's really happening for oneself, it seems, because you're talking about it emerging. That was part of the idea, right, of not having the facilitator, would be that it's like the wisdom of what sort of needs to come out and be expressed back and forth would happen.
Yeah,
so I think it's just vulnerability and authenticity and all that we talk about. So, we talk about that a lot, right, in psychology these days and things, but do we really practice that?
Yeah, the technology of that kind of authenticity is actually, I think, very difficult to cultivate. And I'm a street dancer, so I do a practice called popping. It's a dance. It's a mechanical dance from the 1970s, from the west coast of the U.S. and mostly Black and brown communities pioneering the dance. But what we have in street dance is that if you have beef with somebody, ultimately, if you don't step into a circle and directly engage with them as a test of skill, you basically kind of get, like, that's the way things resolve. So that kind of practice and built-in cultural practices, I think, is actually really hard to replicate, and it's very difficult to. I think there's such different levels of understanding of that kind of system that it's actually very difficult to engage in. But yeah, I think that's one of the major kind of things I've been trying to understand right now, is that, even, for example, the fact that, we live in an era where so many of, our spiritual teachers are contested, for who they are. And they're, when you look at the Western world spiritual system, there's no way to challenge a teacher. There's no system by which, which a student can challenge a teacher, and it's understood that the teacher can only actually hold their position by beating the student. And, I'm not talking about win-lose, complete victory or anything like that, but, even if you go to, the older traditions, there's Zen koan battles or philosophical challenges. And there isn't an inbuilt system in our culture, including within the world of spirituality, that actually is a self-intelligent system that makes sure and ensures the social order and organization is actually reflective of people's actual ability to fulfill their role. And that's, the corrosion of that filters all the way down into the realm of regular, human relationships, because you just don't have a place. Even if you're getting to meet a partner, you actually don't know what their capacities are. And the difference is, if you see people engage in these kind of things more regularly, like, for example, if you're like a salsa dancer, when you meet another salsa dancer, what skills they have and what skills they don't, and where you're at in comparison to them, because you see everybody's dancing in front of you and you engage in it. So, and such a skill or self-intelligent system doesn't exist for our culture en masse. And I think that's actually one of the biggest troubles that we actually have right now. So, that might be a big can of worms, but I think that's a big part of what we're working with right now. Well, I was just going to say, what happens when we don't have those kind of systems? Obviously, differences get resolved by cancellation or by guns. And that's kind of what we're facing down again. So I know that's a bit bleak, but I'm just not trying to sugarcoat anything.
Yeah. So, no, it is. But it's an important thing. And I think, almost everyone can see the divisiveness and see a lot of how important it is and how serious it is.